Let's Talk VDML with KJR.
Welcome back to Let's Talk VDML, which is our podcast, and we're very privileged to have Dave Waxman joining us again for a second time. I think the first repeat external visitor to our podcast, which is great. So thanks for joining us. And so the focus of today, where I wanted to go was just have a look. It was about 12 months ago that we had our first chat, and certainly it was 12 months ago that I met up with the engineering crew in Seattle to look at. It was just pre-version 1.0 of the InfoAssist. So obviously a lot has changed in the tool, but also in the perceptions. And so, I was really keen to get your insights into what's changed, or what have you seen change in the last 12 months with either the tool and or people's response to the tool and what they're looking for out of the tool set.
Sure. I mean, so, where we've been is on the same journey as many with AI, and that it was very exciting. It can open up lots of new frontiers. It can address problems they didn't know was possible to address. And so, where most everyone started was pilots, proofs of concept, right? And there was a lot of drive towards features, right? So I want this to do a new function or connect to a new source, or I want to go from images to multimedia to video and all of these different things. And then new models would come out like for Omni. And so, there is this pace of just lots of new technology coming out all the time. But the challenge is that, you exist in an environment, and most of my customers are public sector customers, so government, defense, law enforcement, education, etc. Also regulated industries like finance as well. And for these types of customers, exciting is one thing, but it really needs to address, they have particular concerns. When it comes to whatever you're going to deploy, I need to know that it's secure, for example. And so their biggest change in the last 12 months has been sort of the maturing. Right? So maturing from I just want to try AI to I'd like to put it into production. And so what I've got is just a couple of ideas here on essentially what are some of these concerns. There's been a lot of law and regulation around things like, does the data stay in the region? Right? It's been a concern. When I put this onto the internet, is it going to go everywhere? Right? And the cloud and the internet, not exactly the same thing, right? So when you are putting into the cloud, how do I know that my data isn't leaving the region? Right? Sensitivity, right? How are we securing all this data? Because it's one thing to just call Azure's OpenAI. It's a whole other thing to make sure that it's going to be secure, right? Throughout the entire life cycle of the data going in from the data coming out. What are the policies that regulate this environment? How are we maintaining those policies? Are we in compliance with those policies, right? These are things that people, again, in the beginning just, it wasn't a concern until you started to go into production, and then it's a government site, and now wait a second, there's certain regulations. Transparency is another one. Yes, we believe we support and use Microsoft, but how do I know when they're actually accessing some of my data, right? I want to have some transparency between them, not just to say, well, they fix it if they need to. No, well, let's just make sure that we know when that's happening, right? And
Thanks for joining another KJR VDML podcast. We have a bunch of events, AI workshops and training coming up. For more info on these, please head to our website, kjr.com.au/training. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next ep.
And there is even ways to control it so that it's prevented from getting in there.
Nice.
And then, all those capabilities that you see in Azure, you want to be able to leverage all those. So there's this pace of AI innovation, and the question is, how do you be able to support all that innovation, but at the same time address those concerns? Because it will never get out of proof of concept or pilot phase if you haven't figured out a way to address some of those.
That's right, because I think there's some, the lure of using the AI is to get answers really quickly, but if anyone who can ask the question can get the answer, then sometimes that's not really where you want it to be. So, definitely. And I think what we've seen in our client base is that the proof of concept / novelty factor is starting to wear off, and it's about, well, how can I use this to make a real difference to the business and to the day-to-day activities of the business. So, and for those, the guardrails are are the ways that we are able to move forward with that. So,
yeah. And so what we've got is to try to address many of those concerns, we've got something known as Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that what we want to try to do is help you address those concerns I was talking about before that really prevent you from using this beyond proof of concept and pilot. It is generally available as of December 23. So again, since the last time we spoke, this is now generally available. There's a number of components. So one of the first is what we call a sovereign landing zone. So the sovereign landing zone is the idea is that a repeatable infrastructure as code means of essentially getting all of your best practices on how to deploy a cloud architecture, right? And making that repeatable, right? So it's going to be management zones. There's a lot of different components to it, but the key is that when you want to be able to repeatedly have those best practices done, and when I build my dev, and then I build test, and then I build prod, I want to make sure that I've got that same commonality of infrastructure, and I don't want to have to custom build or rebuild every single time. And so here, what it is essentially just infrastructure as code that gives you all of those best practices on how to really run that. The next are the sovereign baseline policies. So besides for the infrastructure, right, the architecture, what are the policies that we use to manage those environments? And so we've got security baseline policies, sovereign baseline policies. These are things that will allow you to make sure that when you do load your data that it's not disappearing, it's not moving around without your knowledge, right? That's the whole idea, is setting up those guardrails that we talked about. On top of that, we've got now something known as transparency logs. So what that allows you to do is to get a report, like every 30 days, emailed to you to say, you had called in for some technical support, an operator from Microsoft did go ahead and access your account at your request for this time period, so you know, right? And so you don't just guess, right? So if there's no one's going in there unless you know. Right, that's the whole idea. And we also have a customer lockbox as well as a means to go, unless I say so, you can't get in. And then the idea is that everything that I just described, it's all available on Microsoft Learn. So it's easy to get access to, easy to go through. And it's a very positive way of making that repeatable infrastructure, policies, the ability to watch. We even have something called drift. So frequently when you go and do a deployment in AI, at the time of accreditation and assessment, everything's good. But over a period of time, maybe you add management groups, there's new people, there's new products, there's new software gets installed, there's updates. How do you know if you're still in compliance with the policy? And so we have tools for drift, which allows you to basically determine that difference. Have you begun to drift from those policies, and then recommendations to bring them back, if you were. Because again, these are the things ultimately that are the difference between proof of concept and I really want to use it, and am I compliant? Have I opened up a problem? And that's, we give you a lot of that tooling and views and reports so you can watch it, because that's the key. It's not just about applying it, but it's also managing and maintaining, because you are in production now.
That's right. And I think what I really admire about that stance is it's the opposite, to go fast and break stuff, because often those sorts of activities and those sorts of reports are a result of something going really bad. But you guys have thought about it up front, so that it's front of mind, not just an afterthought of, geez, something's happened, we need to wind things back. It's actually, that should be...
We're trying to be more proactive in having more of an enterprise thought process, and that it's repeatable for everybody, because not everyone's going to have the same depth of skill and knowledge. And the idea is, well, why don't we, in the case of like these policy packs, there's no cost for this policy pack. You just apply it, and now it's there. And if you want the sovereign one, say, all right, well, limit it to only Australia East, whatever it is, you're going to be able to give you an ability to prevent that from leaving the region, even accidentally, because that's what, at the time of deployment, not a problem. But months later down the road, someone does something, they didn't do it on purpose, but now you've got a problem. And so it's trying to apply those guardrails from the beginning, from that design time.
That's it. And I also think from a testing point of view, we also often have, like, production doesn't match UAT or staging, and it doesn't match system integration testing or test environment doesn't match dev. So having the ability to have those in sync gives you a lot more confidence, or should give you a lot more confidence when you deploy that what I tested is actually going to match with what I'm deploying now.
Yeah, and by doing that infrastructure as code, you can then customize it, but it's repeatable.
Yeah,
right? And it's repeatable because it's a script that you can say, all right, I keep reusing this script. I know I'm going to get the same thing in the same way. Again, giving you more confidence that if I applied the security policies before, I apply them again, and I expect it to work the same, right? Because as you said, you'll even find sometimes drift between dev, test, and production.
Yeah, so in most test environments that we work in, there's definitely, and sometimes it's a known drift as opposed to an unknown drift. In terms of we know production is different for this reason, but that doesn't. And then how you fold that back in to get confidence and trust in the results you're getting in test is sort of a bit of a leap of faith to go. Yeah, it happened. We passed it in test, and we hope it'll work in production. So that's interesting. And I think on that point too, the other piece. So that's the infrastructure and sort of the solution. How are we? Or how are you approaching the drift in terms of the results? Because like OpenAI and the Azure AI API, you can ask it the same question multiple times and get different answers.
Yes.
Is there some thought process around how, not to constrain that, because part of the essence of asking the AI is to get a creative answer or somewhat creative answer. So you don't necessarily want it to give you the same answer all the time, but you want it to be reasonably consistent. I think that's it.
So now just focusing on the AI component as opposed to the rest. Yes, because it's not deterministic. It's generative, which means that it is not always going to give you the exact same answer, but it should be similar. So if I give it similar input, I should get relatively similar output. But we do quite a bit of testing. And we have quite a few testing tools now that we use. So 12 months ago, it was very mandralic to try to find out is this the right answer, right? With the information assistant, our focus is on accuracy above all else. So we have a set of test documents, we have a set of test results, and then we've got tooling that actually helps us to see if we're getting more or less accurate responses than before. So, do I need to tune my embedding? Do I need to tune the index? Do I need to tune all these different things? Or even then the model change, right? And then when you change the model, then you need to change the prompt. And so all of these are different links in that chain to getting the most accurate response. And so the focus of Information Assistant, as I said before, is really more about accuracy than brand new features. Right? And so, especially with public sector, right, you want to make sure that it's giving you the proper advice. And that's always been very, very important. And so, testing, I think, and as you know, is really the foundation of that.
Well, I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but that's that's okay in terms of that. So it's and I think we've seen as the general maturity of using AI chatbots and chat functions, everyone is now looking for can I trust it, as opposed to, it gave me an answer, and it's like, that's great. It's now, it gave me the answer, but can I trust it, or is it close to what I want? So
and that's been for us why with the implementation of IA is really just what we call a RAG implementation of retrieval augmented generation. But there are many different levels of implementation on that. And so we make sure that when you have what we call a grounded experience, what that means is that whenever you use it, it's only going to respond with your private data. If you ask it a question and the data is not in there, I expect it to say, I don't know, right? Because that's not what your OpenAI model is normally going to be doing, right? Because it's ultimately, all it is really just a very expensive autocomplete. I ask it a question and it will formulate the most likely answer, but with RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, what's happening is you're forcing it through the architecture to require it to, when it generates a response, it must be grounded. And then when it's grounded in Information Assistant, you'll also be able to see that it doesn't just take it to the document. Well, frequently we have some of our first customers were tax agencies. I didn't understand why. And they said, well, have you ever seen tax law, tax policy? It's quite lengthy. It changes from year to year. It's very difficult to keep up with. They said, well, what we would really like to be able to do is to sort of tap into that. But when you get an answer to my question, take me right to the section of the page of the response, because it might be a 500-page tax policy or tax document. The ability to bring you right to there, then you can develop some trust. Because now I can check the work. If he just said it's somewhere in this 500 pages, no one's going to do it, and then you're not going to really have any trust.
You're just doing control F, trying to find that particular section.
And realizing that, remember, because it's generative, you're not going to be able to get an exact match on the wording, because it's going to phrase the answer to your question. I use my boat for both pleasure and for work. Can I deduct it on my taxes? And then it's going to answer your question and say yes or no and blah. But those exact words are not going to be an exact match, and that's why it's really important to take it to the section of the document which was the foundation of the response, not just requiring an exact, because it's not a keyword search.
Exactly right. So it's, part of the interpretation, I guess, is the human in the loop, isn't it? To say, well, I've got the answer, and is that does that help me then with the whatever insights I needed to do the next action? So and what I was just thinking too, what's you mentioned the tax use case. What's the most interesting use case, without naming customers or anything, that you've come across your customers using the information assistant? Is there one that sticks out as? I
don't know about interesting, but certainly the most common relates around, for instance, like citizen services. So frequently you're going to have a lot of information from the government, whether that's state, local, federal, whatever it turns out to be, and you want to be able to support your citizens. And they ask questions. They ask questions in multiple languages, right? And your documents aren't in multiple languages, and they want to have a free flow of conversation. And so it's really been one of the most valuable ways to very quickly take what is thousands of pages of documentation and information, which the government's trying to make available in the easiest possible way, but forcing you to search for a website and then go to this, because in many cases the state then breaks it down to county then has cities, and your data could be spread throughout, or you're asking a question which might need to address two different areas. I'm planning on opening up a new hairdressing business, and I want to know what some of the tax implications are, and how do I apply? Well, there's a business section, there's a tax section, and you need to be able to pull together from multiple sources, which you don't want the citizen to have to try to figure out, go to this site, go to this site. That's really the magic, right, is where now all those things are feeding in, and what you're seeing is the ability for the citizen to be able to get better service from the government with simply by, the government doesn't have to do anything to the documents. So we just say, load them in. Right? Just load them in and, set it up so they can start asking their questions. And now what happens is they're doing a better job of servicing those citizens. And that citizen use case turned internally is also one of the very big use cases. So like I mentioned, tax, but essentially any company's own enterprise data, they want to be able to tap into it, exploit it, leverage it. And frequently, like I said, in the case of tax has been one example where internally to the own tax department, right, even before they support citizens, they have their own help desk start using it. And the help desk starts to see, let's do that. And that actually drove one of the key features in Information Assistant known as folders. Because most of your RAG implementations are just dump all your data in and start asking questions. The challenge is, like with tax, your tax law for 2021 is different than the tax law for 2022. And so we created a feature known as folders that allow you to drop in. All right, now this is 2021 tax law, this is 2022. When you answer your question, you can simply just use a checkbox and say, answer this question using only this year's tax law. And now you're getting the proper response for the right time. Because most other ones, they just it's all loaded in there, and you don't want to try to through a prompt or anything like that. It's just much easier to go, look, just limit your scope to that particular set.
I think I can't remember whether we talked about it last time we caught up, but definitely one of the scenarios we had was we had all of our KJR case studies in InfoAssist. And you'd ask us, so what does KJR do? And it'd come back and say, they're an awesome testing company, consulting, all that sort of good stuff. And then we added in the HR policy to test the HR piece around. I think the particular prompt we had, and we had some other data in there just to see, is could we extract personally identifying PII information out of the prompt. And so he'd prompt and say, who got a pay rise last year? And come back and say, I can't tell you that. And then we asked through the testing process, what does KJR do? And the answer changed ever so slightly to say that we were a consultancy that used our performance testing skills to lower our impact on global warming because we were cognizant of electricity use in our offices. Now, all of that is factually correct, but not in terms, the context is not quite right there, because in our offices we are conscious about using electricity and reducing our carbon footprint, which is in our HR policy. But we don't necessarily do performance testing on our offices to do that. So we had that, the folders, when that came out, then we were able to separate our HR information from our case studies, from our other project reports, and then sort of filter it down, and then we got back to the answers we were expecting. But when it was all just sort of all lumped in there together, we got the responses that were...
And you get a mix. Education, right? You might have chemistry and physics and all these different things. You might want to limit it, and maybe it's just a particular, first year college, second year college, whatever it turns out to be. Giving those abilities to search across, if the teacher is going to be using it to create a curriculum, right? Don't create the curriculum with year, basically sophomore data when it should just have freshmen, right? And so that ability to really filter both vertically and horizontally is valuable in making sure it's getting you the right answer for you, as opposed to just going straight to OpenAI and getting an answer. It's just without any context, it's just not going to be very helpful that way.
So, and I think the other feature that I quite like in we haven't used the latest version, but the previous version is the ability to compare the answers with the answers from the web, because there's, particularly in our case where we're testing it, we've got similar information on our website as to what we've got in our InfoAssist, but it's not quite the same. So that ability to compare is quite handy, that's for sure.
I mean the driver for it again was always customers telling me about their experience, and they would say, well, I'm using Information Assistant, I'm getting some fantastic answers, but in the back of my mind I'm not sure if I've got the latest information. When was the last item that landed on Mars, right? So going from my textbook, it's only going to be up to that particular point. But maybe in the last 6 months or years since that book's been published, there is newer, more accurate answers.
That's right.
And so we basically put the data science in that allows us to bring together your private data and then compare it with the web and pull those things together. Right? And then what normally is going to happen is, okay, I've got my answer from my private data, I've got the answer from my public data, or in this case the internet. Please compare and contrast the responses. Right? Because if you just give me both to read, I'm going to have to read both, and then someone's going to say, well, how are they the same and how are they different? Right? And I think the key is that because we give you the source code, people very quickly go, hold on for a second, could I change those two data sources instead of being what we call work and web, maybe work and our own intranet, right? And so they're able to do that. And then you can start to think about other ways, because you're like, what are some other situations where I might want to compare and contrast? Law enforcement, you might say, well, I've got two witness statements, right? They're pages or paragraphs long. Wouldn't it be great to just use those and say, what did they agree on and where did they differ? Right? So the data science that we created, or the data science applications that we created that sit underneath that, are then things that you can customize and modify and reuse. Because then you start to see, the idea of taking two large things that compare and contrast and always do it in a certain way, that's actually quite useful.
Or have you noticed the difference in usage/consumption by using the web as the source versus using the local documents? Because I wonder, in terms of ingesting documents, there's the embedding costs in that. Not that it's that expensive, but I wondered if there is a difference between that and just sort of using the open information off the web.
It just depends on the use case, right? So, there will be situations where you do want to search the web. There will be situations where I absolutely positively need to keep this constrained so that I'm looking at just those things. And when you use the Information Assistant, we have different modes, so you don't accidentally go into one. If you know you're in the grounded mode, right, the work mode, then there is no chance the data is ever going to escape. Right? That's the idea. When you're on work and web, you know that if you click the compare with web, that you are potentially sending some of your data to the web.
Yeah.
Right? And so we've made it very clear. So you can't get there by accident is the key.
Right. Yeah, and I like the different color coding in there as well too. For
yes,
those
color coding to make sure that
visual sort of
it's always blue for this experience. It's going to be green for the internet, and then it's going to be this orange when you've got the compare situation.
So it's kind of traffic light-esque essentially, isn't it? So it's like orange is just be, proceed with caution, but get ready to stop. Whereas green is like, it's all good to go through from there. So no, that's cool. So and I think one of the other features that was in between the time when we've talked is the embeddings, if memory serves me correctly, is now you don't have to re-embed or re-upload with subsequent version upgrades. So that
between certain versions. So from 1.0 to 1.1 and I believe 1.2, there is an upgrade path, so you do not need to re-embed your content. But that's not a forever thing, because we will get to a point, and it's very likely to be with a release which I think is probably going to be coming out, let's just call it early next year, calendar, is going to add the ability to, that we already bring in images today, but we're working on some things that will improve that. So like today, we can look at an image and we do OCR, so we'll do optical character recognition on that image. We'll do object recognition on that image. Right? Yeah, so, and I can quickly give you an example of that.
Sounds like a demo. Beautiful.
So I might try, what are some flavors of Breyer's ice cream? What I want to be able to do then is generate a response. Here are some flavors. French vanilla, etc. And what you're getting, though, is what's very important is, besides for the metadata, is understanding that the original source is an image. Your source, so it's going to optical character recognize all of your content on there. And then what you see below, again, we're sharing some of the data you might not put into production. We're showing you what did we find. Well, we thought we found some text. We think that something's dairy, and you get the confidence level. We think something's ice cream. And then you're also going to see where we OCR'd that text all up there as well. And so that's going to be used to then generate that response. And so that's where we are today. And we're going to be working on improving that. So that's going to be one of the consistently, if you're going to do an accuracy, so we can read not only the documents, but of course the tables in the documents as well. And then of course we can bring images in as source material as well, which you see here. But I think the key is going to be that next step is, if I was to show you a graph, right, and we had, and maybe it was multiple histograms on the same graph, and this was the cost and this was the price. You could answer a question of, at which point did we have the most profit? Because you saw cost and price as two separate charts, right? Understanding that chart is really that next step, right? That's where you get so if you were to read a financial report, you're going to be expecting a lot of that stuff. And if you want to answer questions on it, in what month did we generate the most profit? You might not have it in text. It might just be a graphical image, and you then need to interpret. And so that's one of the things that the team's working on now, is going to be getting to the point where, again, improved accuracy is about comprehension. Right? Retention, and then that ability to leverage that content. And part of that is doing an even better job than today on not only seeing what's in the image, but comprehending the image and answering questions based on that.
So I can see a number of use cases that for that, particularly in that multimodal, citizen experience. Essentially, it's like upload a photo. I think in the ACT we have a Fix My Street is one of the functions on their website. So I can see that would be quite a useful one, because you could upload the picture of your street with the pothole or the damage, whatever, and say, well, here it is. But then on the flip side, they could also do some analysis on that to see what else they're seeing in there. So and for the images, do we need to upload images? Is there particular size constraints and stuff like that at the moment?
Or is there? So when we go to the manage content, you can just drag and drop. Now there's more detail here. on that information. But the idea is for the very simple use case of, whether it's a document or an image, you just drag and drop.
Yeah.
You decide what folder you want to drop it in, and then what you can do is create a new one if you want,
nice.
and or tag. And then once you've dragged and dropped it, as a non-technical user, then you can just say, hey, is it ready?
Yeah.
And then you can go ahead and say, all right, let's see, is this ready? And what it'll do is you've dragged and dropped your file, and here's the most recent on top, and then it's going to allow you to then see, did you load it?
Yeah.
And some of the newer things are, what's the status? So from the moment you dropped it in, and did you go through the back-end API, what it turned out to be? And then every single step of the process until it's complete, that's now all been documented. And the value there is really for, sometimes everything doesn't go perfectly. Right? It seems to be stuck somewhere. Or, if the file was too large, or whatever it turned out to be. This status log just makes it easier for your IT team to go, I see where it's stuck. Right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, sort of harking back to your early comments around enterprise versus POC, is that ability to see the status of, sort of see behind the status is very important. So otherwise it's extra phone calls to support desks, or it's like
they're trying to figure it out, and now you can make it very easy for them to see, and they can see as well. But the key is that your non-technical user doesn't need to ask the IT shop every time they want to load a new document or understand what a blob store is. They can simply just drag, drop, I'm ready to go, and once they know it's all been finished, they can then go ahead and begin to have that conversation.
So I think one of the other functions that we looked at, I think it was in preview last time, was the tabular data, so dealing with kind of Excel sheets and stuff like that. Do you see that as an area that is going to grow/improve going forward? Because I know the LLMs generally don't do maths very well. At that sort of question and answer maths, they do a ton of maths in the background because there's fun, but that sort of conversational maths hasn't to date been a strong point. Do you think that's going to change?
Well, I think with the introduction of agents, right, and so now when you get to agents, they are suited for a particular task. You can organize multiple agents to work together. Because right now, the retrieval augmented generation based on the large language model does what it says on the tin, does a very good job. But as you said, it's structured data, databases, spreadsheets, right? These are not things for a language model. These are better suited to a particular agent. And then the idea is what you want is your agents to then become orchestrators, or the large language model become the orchestrator of agents working together, right? And then that's when you get to see sort of that next evolution, if you will, of beyond the large language model, all things go to it, is where you start to use things like agents. And agents then do open up. You can have an agent which connects to your database of sales, and then you can begin to ask English language questions without understanding SQL, without understanding reports, without understanding all those kind of things. I want to ask a question. Right? And in that case, it needs to be able to interpret your question, which is where the large language model comes in. The agent is then used to interrogate that and bring the data back, again, as text, which is what you asked, right? Well, you made the most most profit in July. Even though you didn't know how to connect to the database.
That's right.
And that's where the models and the agents begin to work together.
That's it. And then with that ability then to use that and just like, well, ask a question, why did we make the most money in July for that particular reason? So and that'll be contextually, depending on where you are, there'll be reasons for that. So
and is it written out in text, or just because you read a chart? That's where you, as a person with the Mark I eyeball and the brain, have been able to put all those pieces together. This is where the agents begin to help you break up those big problems into smaller problems, and then use the right tool at the right time.
So it's going to be interesting. And do you think that, obviously you've got a fair bit of experience with co-pilots, or co-pilots is probably a good way to describe it. And InfoAssist it's not a co-pilot, but where do you think that inflection point is going to be, where it's sort of, do you see that a co-pilot effectively would be an agent that could use InfoAssist? Or is that
it's more so the way in which it's organized, we call it a Copilot template. Right? So there are first-party Copilots like the one for M365. Right? You also use when you go to Bing.
Yep.
Right? And so, yes, the word Copilot certainly has been used in a lot of different contexts, capital C, lower C.
Yep.
This is an example of one that you can customize and modify, right? So you're getting the source code for this one.
Yep.
Most of your Copilots, you don't get the source code. It's just, that's the product and you use it.
Yeah.
Certainly there is a combination of the two things,
Yep.
right? So right now there's something known as Copilot Studio, which is from Microsoft, and that's ability for low-code development.
Yep.
Right? So typically what we're talking about here, information systems, that's pro code, right? Actual developers developing code, et cetera, all the rest of that. But with the Copilot Studio, the citizen developer can create their own Copilot simply by, click here, click here, click here, click there, and next thing you know, you have a Copilot. Now, you won't have the same amount of customization out of the box, right? But there are extensions to it that allow you to then orchestrate. So we have a new one that's going to be coming out soon, and that's going to be very helpful because what it's going to allow you to do is to orchestrate when certain words are used. You're going to go down a certain route, right? So today is simply just question and answer, right? There is no, if they want to be routed to an operator, take them down this way, right? If they want to ask for something, take them down that way, right? And so that begins to add a little bit more to the complexity of it, but it adds a lot to the flexibility for you to now know that every single time, if they said, I want to be taken to an operator, that it doesn't just keep asking questions. It goes, right, there's the flow for you, right? That flow changes. And that flow could be calling a particular agent, for example.
Yeah, which may or may not be a person agent or a, because these days it's, with the advances in sort of the language that the language models can use and their ability to then manipulate a voice, sometimes you don't really know whether you're talking to a computer or talking to a real person.
It is certainly getting better. I mean, I got an example here. So in a citizen services use case, so I want to be able to just ask a question. My son's 13 years old. Does he need a fishing license? And I want to get an answer. It says, no, you don't need it because he's under 16. I'm brought to the citation, and then I'm brought right to the page of the document. So it brings me right to page 89 of 100, right? And so it's answering my question, which is good. Now, everybody here, now I speak English, but we may be supporting citizens where that's not maybe their primary language or native. And so here is an example of where I'm going to ask a question. Now, when I ask this question, you're going to see that I'm essentially asking this question in Japanese. Now, notice when I asked the question in Japanese, it answered in Japanese, even if the document was in English. So now what happens is now you can load in your documents. Doesn't matter what language they are, right? So if you're supporting citizens and you're supporting citizens of many different languages, many different cultures, and you want them to be able to ask their questions and if pointing them to a document where that's not their native language is not going to be most helpful to them. Right? Answering their question in the language in which they asked it, that's exactly what you're seeing here.
That's going to be great for travel buddies, and so or trying to book a tour or bits and pieces when you're
and again, it is, as you begin to work multinationally, or you're going to, citizens, you're going to have a lot of different people speaking a lot of different languages, and you don't want that to become a barrier to providing the best government support that you can, because you don't have that many native speakers in that language, and they want to ask that question at whatever time of day or weekend, and they need an answer now. You don't have to. Now it's speaking all those different languages for you. Even though you only saved it in one language, they can communicate in their own native languages both ways.
Wow, that's very cool. And can we upload documents? So the first document was in English, but you can upload in another language and then convert it to English.
Or you could say, the documents in Spanish. I'm going to ask my question in English, and please respond in Spanish, right? Or please respond in French, right? So you can. It doesn't have to be. You can control it as you see fit, but out of the box, it's going to say, well, whatever language that you asked it in, I'll probably answer in the same. Even if the document's not in that native language, and that really does open it up for the citizenry.
That's right. So it's, and definitely from a testing perspective, it's like in that scenario where you're putting in an input and you're expecting an output. It's like, so you're putting an input in one way and expecting an output in a different way. The verification of that is, adds another level. It's not just sort of garbage in, garbage out, is it? It's like input in, enhanced value coming out the other side.
Well, so this example here, this question that I asked in Japanese is the same question.
Oh, it's the same, is it?
That's the same question, but I asked it in Japanese.
Yeah.
And I can see I got the same citation and reference. So even if I'm not a native Japanese speaker, I'm able to see where that took me to, and since I know that was the question, it's very likely I got a good response. But you still have to check it, but the idea is you can very quickly go, it looks like we're getting the same answer because we're getting the same citation.
Yeah, that's right. So that ground truthing is, it's verified there, isn't it? So it's the same ground truth. So we're just sort of closing out, and could talk all afternoon. Where do you see sort of the future of the InfoAssist and, there's agents coming. They may already be here, sort of thing. So where do you see the InfoAssist going?
Look, like I said, right now, accuracy always remains on top. The sovereignty, the security, the transparency, those are all sort of just part of the base, right, that you have to do. We're now being able to get back to some more features, right? And so number one of which is that ability to understand and comprehend images, right? Adding multimedia, right? So videos, I got that request just the other day. People want to, load in a number of videos, whether that's someone making a recording of a class or a professor, or maybe a speech, politician's speech, and I want to be able to go. I don't want to watch all those, but I want to generate a response based on the last 5 years of speeches, right? Right?
Okay.
Or what was publicly said about this particular topic, right? And that means bringing in video as well, right? Video and audio, right? So beyond just documents and images. So those are going to be, I think, some of the basics. There's also going to be some work on the infrastructure just to make it easier. If it's possible to make it easier, so even a non-developer, because right now it does take a developer to get deployed. But if we can make that easier, I think that makes that better for everybody.
Yes, I was going to say it's pretty easy to do at the moment. I remember doing it literally on a plane, in the sky, and it was done by the time we got there. It wasn't a long flight either, so it's like to make it even easier, that's going to be very impressive.
Well, because right now you do go to GitHub. You need, so you're going to clone the repository. You're going to then follow the instructions and do the installation. But I'd like it to be a push button. I don't know if I can get it to that. I can certainly get it to be a push button, but then I might lose some of the flexibility. So that's the balance that we've been trying to strike. Is really give you the power. And the flexibility, but if we have simplicity on the other side, we're trying to work on those.
It's definitely exciting times, and we're using the InfoAssist every day within our organisation. So it's definitely proving to be a valuable tool for us, and I think it's only going to get better and better. So it's really cool. Thanks very much for your time. It's always a pleasure. So
thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Good to have you in Australia. So it's not much rugby to check out while you're here, but it's good to have you back. But I'm sure you'll be back when the rugby season's on for sure.
Well, I did catch the Wallabies on TV. So
okay, that's it. So
great win.
Definitely.
All right.
If not unexpected.
Yes.
That's cool. Thanks,
all
mate.
right.